Lamptey Show. My name is Joey Crone and I'm joined by Neil Allison.
Hello.
And Paul Knowles.
Good evening.
We're back. Back with a bang.
Yes.
Sort of. Good summer?
Average.
Anything
Reasonable.
to report, Paul?
Oh, it's all right.
Any more kids?
No. Still just the two.
Still just the two. Two's enough, isn't it, I think?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, we're back and we're going to do a little pre-season roundup, aren't we? So I thought we'd start with moments of the summer. Paul, do you want to go?
It's the never-ending hope that we might sign someone you're excited by. And as we approach the start of the season, it's still there, isn't it? You're still waiting.
Still waiting. Yep.
Not at all
Sorry,
excited by any of them.
Oh,
Well-
Armstrong, I'd say.
But even Armstrong, is he 18?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's part of a jigsaw, isn't he? He's not the... But it sounds like he's got something.
But I think we've also got that expectation on James Maddison, who's also 18. And then that lad who signed, who was at Spurs, who I know is slightly older than 18, but is
20.
also... Is he 20?
He's 20, yeah.
Is also, if you look at his career, has barely played any games. And then, I don't know, it's just... The only thing is, not everyone's back, not all the Premier League teams are back from their tours yet. And you're like, well, we need someone who's about 26, 27, who's played 200 league games. Not someone who's coming from Arsenal's academy, who's never sort of seen a league performance in his life. So I'm still a bit nervous about the whole attacking aspect of our team.
Were you disappointed that we didn't re-sign Chuba Akpom? Is that what it is?
I was still devastated we didn't sign Leon Clark. He's gone to Bury.
That would have been lovely, I think.
just- I just think that's just absolute. I just don't get that.
Well, they've got some money, haven't they? But I can't see that they've got a higher budget than us.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it was a choice of re-signing Leon Clark or not having Marcus Tudguy and Raider Johnson re-sign. If it's a case of he's worth two players, then I think he is worth two players.
Let's go for Neil's moment of the summer.
Mine was the Telegraph ballsing up the kit launch on behalf of the club, which I thought was hilarious. I mean, I guess Kieran didn't think so at the time, but just seeing that unfold, having whipped up a load of hoopla for weeks and weeks about, oh, look, this is going to happen, yeah, what a great morning it's going to be. Oh, hang on, no, everybody's seen the picture already. Yeah, it was funny.
It would have been, their promotional campaign would have been better off being called It Starts Yesterday.
Yeah. Well, the world of Photoshop, they could have done something about that.
I'm going to book the trend and say that the moment of the summer for me was signing Romain Vincelo, who I think is, and I agree, clearly we need extra players in, but I would have thought bar a striker was the template of exactly who we needed. A really tough tackling, sneaky, disliked by other teams, experienced central midfielder. Arguably the one thing that we've been missing in the last 3 or 4 seasons.
A player who the team who he's coming from didn't want to leave, which is unusual for us. We don't tend to poach players. We always get hand-me-downs, so it's quite nice to turn that on its head a little bit.
Yeah, and it means that everyone can stop talking about paying a transfer fee as well.
Yeah. Can we get some official confirmation on his name, though? Because I know the Leyton Orient guys are calling him Romain Vincelo, but that's still got an element of only fools and horses about it. I kind of want to check with Kieran or someone just to ask him how he pronounces his name.
See, my guess would be Romain Vincelo, but I know for a fact that I'm never going to say that because I'm from Coventry. It's just...
Can't say it.
Yeah, even if that's his actual name, it's going to make me sound like more of a pretentious toss than I already am if I start
Makes me sound like when I tried to call it Frank Nubler, when he's not even French.
Yeah, Nublar.
Nubler,
yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. We might have to call him Vinny or something. That might do. I'm sure that we'll dub him some sort of name between us. Yeah. So for me, I think So I was excited by him, but I can gather and understand the lack of excitement about the remaining of the signings. So, Paul, before we started, you asked a number of people on Twitter about a number of questions to do with what they expected for the season, players and team-wise. So do you want to go through those questions and then we'll attempt to answer them and argue about it for the next hour or so?
What, one by one? Or
Go through all the questions first, and then we'll go through them one by one.
The questions were: what are your wants to watch, youngster to flourish, want to forget, who will be top goal scorer, and where will we finish in the league table?
Okay. Do you want to give us? Do you want to pick one to start off with and give us your answer?
Well, the most interesting one, I suppose, is the ones to forget category, which I think has thrown up two players. One person said Aaron Martin, and I checked, and it wasn't Neil. So
you wait.
And then the two ones who seem to come through quite often are Burge and John Fleck. And as one of them seems to be our first and possibly only goalkeeper, and the other one appears to be our first choice central midfielder, that's slightly concerning, I think.
Yeah, but haven't people got a bit of a irrational dislike of Burge? And maybe not even irrational because of what happened at Worcester, but I can't really get it myself. I think that there was enough that he did at the tail end of last season that gave him a fair crack of the whip to be number one for now.
Being as young as he is as well. I mean, that's kind of the key. It's a little bit different to coming into your own with 4 games to go and being Marcus Tudgay. When you're his age, you kind of think, well, no, you should be doing more. But Burge is still young, he's still learning, and yeah, he went a little bit mad in that Worcester game. But I certainly think the last couple of months he started to feel a lot more comfortable being first choice keeper, which he didn't seem to be in those earlier games. So I think he's earned a chance. He made some great saves at the end of last season, and he was actually fairly dominant, which we couldn't say the first few months.
Yeah, and I guess I haven't had the privy of watching him in pre-season, but it seems that a constant complaint of people from his detractors is that he doesn't command his area, and I thought the tail end of last season that was one of the main attributes that he displayed. Am I looking through weird glasses here, or?
I think he improved, and that's kind of the key. That's what we're always looking for him. I mean, if he was going backwards, then you'd kind of have an issue. You'd probably want to question it more. But I think from where he came from, where he did seem a small keeper and he was quite nervy, I thought he improved really, really well at the tail end of last season. So I just got, without seeing him in pre-season, it's hard to judge why people may be giving him a bit of grief. But it certainly starts as number one.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with both what you said. I never saw him as being that much of an issue last season. I mean, personally, I'd have given him the first choice. He'd have been my first choice at this point last season. And then subsequently what went on during the season, I saw no reason to have doubted that in my mind. I mean, I thought towards the end of the season he looked a lot more dominant. I think at the start of the season he seemed to be, and Kieran said this at the end of last season when we spoke to him, I think he was a bit shafted by Presley, to be honest. He was given the number 1 jersey and then saw a loan come in who I don't think, they weren't looking at Allsop, were they? Allsop appeared when they sold Callum Wilson. So I think he's got the right to compete for it and start with it on his back. I mean, where we go from here is basically down to him, but I don't see the reason to bring another goalkeeper in at this stage.
On the subject of Allsop, have you seen what he's done this summer?
No.
Signed a reasonably long-term deal that makes him the 4th choice keeper at Bournemouth.
Money. There we go.
Yeah, it's an odd decision for a young keeper like that, isn't it? Unless
he
just really likes money, yeah.
You've got to remember that if you ask Stuart Taylor to sit down with Alan Shearer and compare winners' medal, Stuart Taylor's pissing himself.
Yeah, his games to medals ratio has got to be pretty strong, hasn't it?
It's up there with Peter Cech's at Arsenal's.
Well, yeah. Okay, so Neil, your response
to that question?
Yeah,
that you're asking. What's the question again? Wants to watch?
Wants to forget.
Wants to forget.
Forget.
Ironically, yeah, it's which one would you forget?
Oh God, trust me. Tudgay myself. I think I was baffled by him getting an extended contract or a renewed contract, or whatever the hell it was. I just think after what he gave us last year, I couldn't give a monkeys about the last month where he finally showed a few touches. He gave us an absolute appalling season for the most part, and he got rewarded for it, which I struggle to believe. So yeah, I'd happily see him gone to get a couple of others in up front.
Yeah, I just can't, for the life of me, I can't pitch what his wage would be that would make him a viable option, because you would have thought as a 31, 32-year-old striker whose primary experience is playing higher up in the league pyramid, I can't see that he's going to be on pittance money. Maybe he is, but when we keep talking about this salary protocol management thing, you would have thought that even if he's on, say, £2,000 a week, that would make him a reasonably significant earner in comparison to what we could use that money elsewhere for. I guess part of the thing comes into it that you can't keep having this phenomenal turnover of players, can you? And that he's one of the only people in the squad that's above 30, but he's also not very good.
That's the issue, isn't it? I mean, it's almost rewarding poor performances, and we needed, after what happened last year, let's all face it, was atrocious. So the season, the way it panned out was poor all the way through. But for him to play the way he did for the majority of that season, and then for Moby to say, okay, I want you to come back next year, it just... I don't see what message that gives. That's a poor message. I wanted a fresh perspective up front, and for me, I would have kept Nublet ahead of him. I know people struggled with that, but Nublet had far more of an impact on that team than Tudgay did.
Paul, would you have kept Nublet or Tudgay?
Well, I was going to make 3 points on Tudgay. One, at the end of last season, the strikers was always the issue. Out of all of them, he decided to keep Tudgay. We'll see if that was a wise decision. But I think as we get approach the season now, we look at it and we've only got Tudgay and Armstrong. So we're not particular. If we hadn't kept Tudgay, we'd only literally have Armstrong. So from that point of view, at least he's keeping someone he knows from last season. The second thing is, I was bewildered by the response of some of the fans to Tudgay being re-signed. He's going to get his 20 goals. He's not. He's just really not. But the other thing is, as we approach the start of the season, and we're all flapping around waiting for the striker to come in, if we do sign another 1 or 2 strikers, which I think we need, he's going to be 32 and fourth choice goalkeeper, fourth choice centre forward at Coventry City. And you just think, well, that's where I agree with Neil. That's what the real baffling thing is we're all going, we need a striker. And I go to see him on Twitter going, it's all right, we've got Marcus Tudgay. Everyone's going, we still need strikers.
I have a feeling that you may be being optimistic about the quality and volume of strikers that we're going to be bringing in between now and the end of August.
That might be the case, but it's just the guy scored 4 goals last season. One at the Rico, and I think that was a penalty. Or he scored 1 at the Rico. It's just if that was a new signing, we'd have signed him from, I don't know, Yeovil. And he'd only scored 4 goals. We'd all be going, what the hell is this new signing? Because we re-signed him, people were a lot more optimistic. That Tudgay baffles me, but he baffled me when we signed him. So
anyway. You gave a good stat earlier that I saw. That when was the last time that he scored more than 6 goals in a season?
The 10-11 season.
And that was how many in total?
I think he did score about 9.
I thought you were going to say 15.
Yeah,
okay.
It's 150% return on his previous best. Yeah, it's not.
All right, so next one. All right, as we're now talking about strikers, what we go? Who do people think is going to be our top goal scorer?
I like the answer. I like the answer where people say he's not with us yet, because that's optimistic. That's saying that someone else is going to come in. I think with Armstrong, I think he'll be half the season, and then he'll probably go back. He might play reasonably well, but I think someone's going to come in. We've got to have another striker, and they'll probably be the one. Hopefully.
I agree. Unfortunately, I think the likelihood is that whilst the hope would be that they're not here yet, or that it would be Armstrong, for example, I have a horrible feeling that it will be someone that is here now, and they'll be top scorer like Jim O'Brien or Raider Johnson.
Oh, God.
Because they'll have been here and played 40-odd games. I just can't see who we're going to... I don't see who we're going to unearth at this point. I'd like to be optimistic about it, and maybe Armstrong. I mean, everything that you hear about Armstrong is phenomenal, isn't it? But it's a massive ask of an 18-year-old lad that's only played a sort of handful of. I mean, admittedly, first 15 appearances for Newcastle over the last year or so, which isn't bad, but it doesn't. I don't know. It's a lot to ask of a young lad in League One.
I'm clinging on to the thought that we had when we moved to Northampton, and that season when we first went into that game, and it was Callum Wilson, Billy Daniels, players like that, and I remember looking at that team and thinking, Jesus, we've got no chance. We're really going to struggle. A month later, we were looking at that team and thinking, oh, look at this, what great shape. Leon Clark working with Wilson. You've got Baker and Musa. The team suddenly became... you just when you flip the perspective, it looked different. Now, I know that's based on absolutely nothing tangible, but it can still happen. So I kind of don't want to... I don't want to throw them down just yet, because we all know how the season can sort of warp your perspective if things go a little bit differently.
There is a hope from my part that Danny Swanson could end up being a big player for us this season, much in the same way that we wouldn't have had that much hope with Musa going into that season, and then all of a sudden he really kicked through. When we signed Swanson, there was reason to be enormously optimistic, wasn't there? He did really well in Scotland last season, apparently, when he went on loan to St Johnstone. There is nothing in theory to say that he couldn't come up for us, but again begs the question, why hasn't it happened already? And I think you have to remain reasonably optimistic and say, let's hope it happens, but it is with a caveat of, I'm not going to hold my breath.
We're not basing it on anything,
yeah.
are we?
Well, I'd hate to be the harbinger of why I'm not particularly positive, but I just look at it and go, well, the difference between Armstrong, and I haven't seen Armstrong, and I don't know what his physical presence
Miniature.
is. Yeah, I get the feeling that was the case, is the fact that Callum Wilson, I think we tend to forget, was 21, and he was a man when he broke in that season. He wasn't a boy, he was built like a man. And last season, Dominic Samuels was the similar thing where he was... My worry with Armstrong is if he's not particularly physically imposing, and when we see and I'm assuming we're going to play 4-2-3-1, which I'm assuming is what he's been playing in pre-season, looking at the players he's had on the pitch. You look at the three behind Armstrong and you see James Maddison, who's also 18, who's pretty lightweight, Ruben Lemares, who is 20 and pretty lightweight, and Danny Swanson, who I think if he got piss wet through would still be 6 stone. And I don't see many teams in the League One having 4 extremely lightweight strikers winning many games. There's no... Unless they're all lightning quick and unbelievable with the ball, I think that's a very, very lightweight attacking 4. And then when you've got behind them, you've got the Beard, as I believe we should be calling him, and John Fleck. There's not a lot of height in there either. So it's still a very lightweight attacking 7.
Yeah. In defence of Armstrong, and again, I haven't seen him yet, supposedly he is slightly Aguero-esque in that his physical frame belies actually him being quite strong. He's got a remarkably low centre of gravity and can hold people off, from what the youth coaches at Newcastle have said. So it's possible, but he's not... And it depends on what you want, doesn't it? They were on about, is it Jordan Slew that played for Cambridge? They said was really big and strong and pacey, but then not very good either. And I don't know, I agree with you. I think it's very obvious that we need more options, don't we? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing having these lightweight, fancy players. I just think you probably need different options for different teams, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Oh, yeah, I agree. I think it's just... Well, I did see someone go, they want to talk about us needing a big man. Barcelona don't have a big man. And it's like, well, yeah, but they've got Messi, Neymar and Suarez. It's a bit like Mila Kunis doesn't need to be a hooker to have sex because she's very attractive. It's just...
Wow.
That's the first analogy in there, guys.
But it's that sort of... you can't compare... if Barcelona are playing at League One standards, they might need tall man. It's just... we've got to accept we are where we are.
I think we're all in the same boat where I think we all want to be optimistic, but it's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, you need something to actually judge, or with the results and everything from pre-season. There's very little there. Being logical, you've had a poor pre-season. that doesn't bode well. So you're kind of having to forget that. Bring on Saturday. Let's have a look.
All right, so as we're now trying to be a bit more positive, which youngster are we expecting to break through and flourish?
Oh, I'm going to ask Neil first.
Hey. Well, we all know that Maddison's primed for a big season just because he's a good player. I was actually going to raise George Thomas though.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because I think he's got something. I'm not entirely sold on him yet, but I just think everybody the managers and the coaches, they all think highly of him. And when you do see him, he's so lively, and I'm looking forward to seeing him on the pitch more, really. I want to get a better gauge of him, because I just think there's certainly something there. It was a lovely finish, in pre-season, that little lob he did over the keeper. That was great. And he's really dynamic, and you kind of need that. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of him on the pitch.
He's the sort of archetype of the player that wins my heart immediately, much in the way that Aaron Phillips has. Like you say, very dynamic, very industrious, really hard working. And yeah, I think it would be interesting to see him some more this season. I think we will, given the sparsity of our squad. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see how him and Maddison come on, because Maddison has clearly got so much spotlight on him, which would appear to be what he wants and what he thrives on. He seems to be a very confident lad, doesn't he? But that you wonder whether George Thomas might sort of go under the radar a little bit without having all the pressure, and maybe do just as well. Paul?
Yeah, my only concern with Maddison is obviously he's got the hallowed number 10 jersey worn by such heroes as
Name one.
I do worry for Maddison that there's a lot of pressure on him, especially when he doesn't have a senior player alongside him, either in the wide players or up front. It does sort of slightly concern me that the pressure might be immense. I mean, it's midfield that still concerns the hell out of me. I'd like to see a bit more of Ivan Lawton. I have no idea if he's any good. And I know we could probably say this about a couple of players. It's got Aaron Phillips. If he doesn't play 30 games this season at right back, then I think it's probably time for him to move on.
It'll be interesting to see how the back four lines up, because you've got a lot of players in there that can play pretty much everywhere across the back four. Raider Johnson can play left back and centre back. Ricketts apparently can play anywhere. Willis has played everywhere. And it'd be interesting to see how they line up, because it would strike me that the first choice at the moment is Stokes at left back, Willis at right back, and then Ricketts and Johnson at the centre half patch. But I'm not convinced that's how I'd set up. I think I'd be more inclined to play Johnson at left back with Ricketts and maybe even Willis, or maybe even Martin. I know I'm the only person left in the world that rates Aaron Martin, but possibly. And then Aaron Phillips at right back. But you've got options there. You wonder whether that'll end up being a hindrance.
I do worry that we're playing four fullbacks in the defence. I just don't get... I know our performances last season with Raider Johnson were significantly better when he played, and I'm glad that he's re-signed. I see him as a liability at centre-half. And the thing with Sam Ricketts is we just don't know. I mean, on the mini pod that you put up earlier, the Wolves fan was very complimentary about Sam Ricketts. Basically talked about him sort of helping changing the culture off the pitch as much as on it. I don't think one of the issues, I could be wrong, I don't get the feeling with Cov, one of the issues is people getting pissed off the pitch. So I don't think he needs to come in and change the attitude of the players in terms of their focus on football. I think my issue is he just another 2 years on, not playing alongside who's probably as dominant or is in a team as good as they were at Wolves? And let's face it, when Wolves got relegated, we all knew they were likely to bounce back that season. It does concern me that he might... I don't see him as a centre-half, basically, and I've always seen him as quite a good full-back, and my concern is at centre-half. Is he really the dominant player or as good as we need?
To your point about the players not having a drinking culture necessarily, I would suggest that's largely in part to the fact that none of them are old enough to drink in pubs yet.
Oh yeah, that as well.
But I agree with you. I think it'd be again, and it's this constant sort of trying to cling on to optimism in the face of cynicism. But there's a horrible part of me that thinks it might be an Ian Dezu, where 2 years ago he was an excellent centre half in League One, and there's that possibility that it might have just sort of what am I trying to say? You know what I mean? Passed him by effectively, and that's
We've
based
got
on
that strong form, haven't we, in that area with the
Yeah.
amount of people you look over time and the amount of players you've had like that. We've been good, and you bring him in like Sean Gota. He came in. I thought that's it. We're bound for the Prem again. No, Sean Gota wasn't interested, and you just
Sherwood,
you do worry,
Kilban, Desu.
yeah. Let's go through the list. It's horrible to think that way, but I mean, he's 33 though. He's not quite at that stage yet. You'd hope he maybe got a couple more years left.
And don't get me wrong, he might be fantastic. I hope to God he is. He seems on paper like a really solid signing, doesn't he? But I was worried about the Wolves fan that was on the mini podcast saying about it was palpable that in the Championship that he was short of a yard of pace, and I don't know whether that's because the Championship is so much faster, or maybe just that extra year sometimes takes its toll, doesn't it? And then 2 years on, you just don't know, do you?
But it's also a case of Wolves weren't as dominant in the Championship as they were in League One, and that's. I mean, the other defender, I still don't see. I know when we spoke to Kieran Crowley, he was like, "Well, Jordan Willis has to make a decision if he wants to play at high level. It might be a fullback." I just don't see him as a fullback, and I worry that if with at least with Aaron Phillips, you get the feeling that he's going to be somewhere around the pitch, which is useful. My problem with Jordan Willis is he is ostensibly a defensive-minded player, which isn't an issue, but it does it leaves the fact in the modern era, your fullbacks have got to be more than just a stopper. And I also wonder if it's stunting his development. It's either play centre-back or look to move elsewhere and play centre-back. It's, he's at that age now where he's got to sort of force his way into the first team. If he sees that as a fullback, that's fine. And, maybe I could be completely wrong. He could be a really good fullback in the future. Out of the fullbacks we've got, I see him stunting Aaron Phillips and probably one of the Kelly Evans twins more than
I'd agree.
A sort of developing player himself.
At least we've got a lot of defenders.
Yeah.
I mean,
line them up. Yeah.
It gives us an option of playing Raider Johnson up front when inevitably, and I'm willing to make a bet now that happens at some point during the season.
Well, we'll go to 5 up front. For the last 10 minutes, we did that every single game last year, didn't we?
I'm on about him starting up front.
There we go.
Jordan
Next level.
Yeah. I'm talking about a 15-game scoreless run from Tudgay, Adam Armstrong being injured, and just thinking, well, we kind of want to play Maddison behind, so Raider Johnson up front, I guess.
It's all about the link-up.
Yeah, and I, for one, am all for that, by the way.
Do it.
Let's give it a whirl, yeah.
So most of the people I've favoured have sort of said that the youngster to flourish would be Maddison, but I think they've all sort of gone the obvious choices. A couple of one of the Kelly Evans twins.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad call, actually. I mean, you see the highlights of them, and I always get confused. Whoever the one who plays on the right.
No idea.
I like. Devon, potentially, plays on the right-hand side, but he's got a very nice cut inside, and I know I shouldn't base an entire opinion based on just him cutting inside, but I will, and he's got a good one. And keep an eye out for that. I think he'll make a move this year.
Paul, what's next on the list?
Next one is basically who do you think will end up being Player of the Year?
Oh, Jesus. Neil?
Well, given last year's it became a default who played the most competition, I'm hoping that's not the case. I think if we can keep him for the year, I think Maddison is all set to have a great year. And I know we're scared to ball him up, we're scared to put the pressure on him, but he's that good. And I think we just need to embrace it. We need to embrace the fact that we've got someone who is 18, doesn't seem to realise he's 18, doesn't seem to realise he looks 10, doesn't care, just plays football the way it should be played. And just we need to realise that he's 18, he's going to give the ball away sometimes, he's going to try stuff, but I'd much rather having someone confident to try stuff and a crowd confident to say, give it to him again, let him give it another go, than just getting worried if he gives the ball away or getting commentary about it. Just he's different. I haven't seen a good teenager like him since Robbie Keane, so just leave him to it.
Good call. Paul?
I suppose because I've wanted that sort of player for a long time, I suppose it's got to be Le Beard, our hipster Frenchman, who the Leighton Orient fans couldn't speak more highly of him. And, That does often mean quite a lot when players. There again, we all know that fans take to certain players for certain reasons, and sometimes they don't always work elsewhere. But at least he seems to be solving one of the issues we have, unless you speak to the people who went yesterday and they went, "Oh yeah, the defensive midfield were chronic." And you're like, maybe he hasn't solved that issue then. But no, I think I'm looking forward to seeing him play. I mean, he's again been given the hallowed number 4 shirt, so following on from such defensive greats.
Again, yeah. I'm just looking forward to seeing him. I mean, the man's a god.
I know. Is he one of the ones? Is he one of the ones who also owns the breakfast bar in London? Is he one of those hipsters?
What, like a cereal cafe?
Yeah.
He's
bringing his cereal cafe to Coventry.
He looks like it, but I would go and eat in that cereal cafe if that was a choice. I mean, the man's gorgeous. There's no two ways about it. I think he is a pretty high chance of coming out with it. I'm going to go for a left field shot and say Lee Burge. I just think, I think we're going to have again, you're going to come down to who's going to have played 40-odd games, which is a select few. It's potentially between him and O'Brien. And I just don't. I think he'll grow this season, and I think he's got the makings of a really, really fantastic keeper. I might be wildly wrong, and like I say, it's slightly left field, but I think he's got a pretty good shout for it. What's next?
Well, the only one left is final league predictions. But before we do that, I thought I'd interject my annual "It's Make or Break Seasons 4" list.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We're going to keep Connor Thomas and John Fleck in there for another year. We're going to throw in.
This is the third year in a row where they've had to make a big step up.
Yeah.
I'd say Thomas.
Jordan, the fact that everyone else has been sold. If some of the other players were here, then they'd be on the list as well. Like Jordan Clark would still be on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had the good just disappear. I'm going to add Aaron Phillips and I'm going to throw in Jordan Willis because I think the other youngsters are all too young, but those are in the age now where they've played a lot of games. I know Phillips hasn't really, but he's been around the squad for 2-3 seasons, and it really is time because we know that Deli Evans, the Kelly Evans twins are waiting in the wings, as it were. We know that Aaron Phillips really has to sort of make it this season here, or he's probably going to have to leave because the next one on the conveyor belt is going to be ready. Would anyone else like to be added to the list?
I'd say Chris Stokes, but he's only just really signed, so it's a bit harsh. But no, I think he's got a lot to prove.
Swanson?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Swanson, Johnson, I'd say. I mean, Johnson, really, you would be thinking there's given the impact that he had when he played last season, and you can point to defensive liabilities or whatever, but his goals and the impact that he has on the team, he should be the absolute stick-on for player of the season. It shouldn't be really a contestable point. If we continue to do as well as we did with him in the team, and he can play 40 games next season, it should be him. The fans adore him. He is a menace, whether you like it or not. And he, for whatever reason, he has an impact on the team. My fear with him, again, is that I'm not convinced we're going to see 30, 40 games out of him. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Can I just throw in one issue I have with that? Is it's finally time to make it or break it season really has to have an upper limit. And if you're talking about someone who's nearly 30, as having their make or break season, I think John Fleck's just on the cusp of this make or break season decision.
Yeah, but what's it? I think there's a whole different thing of, is it make or break for them as a player, or is it make or break for them as a COV player? And I think that's more what it's down to for me. I mean, I think you could argue that Johnson's had a successful career, whichever way you cut it. I mean, he's only 27, 28, but he's done well for a good long time. I don't think it's a case of working out whether he's a good, successful player or not. It's a case of whether he's a success for us. Some people just need to drop down a league or, go to Scotland, which is effectively dropping down 3 or 4 leagues. But I think more it's a case of whether he's able to play regularly and have the same impact on the team as he did last season when he played.
Well, Sam Gayton has done a blog on Connor Thomas, which I think sort of takes about half an hour out of this podcast, which I've retweeted, which is well worth reading. Basically going, Colin Thomas did well 2 years ago. Last season he disappeared to make it or break it. So I'd read that, to be honest.
Yeah, do that.
Do that. On Conor Thomas alone, do that. If anyone wants to write one on John Fleck,
I will.
then that'll be much appreciated as well.
Yeah,
I think it'll come out differently to what you guys think.
Put the podcast down and just read some decent blogs of people who know what they're talking about. So do you want to do league positions then?
League positions, yeah.
Neil, do you want to start?
I always hate this question because I sort of always think of it in a twofold manner. So there's what we should be expecting, what we should be demanding, and what's probably going to happen based on everything we've seen over the summer. Now, you heard me having a go at Coventry City Head of Communications at the end of last year's pod. That wasn't good. Wasn't my finest moment. But I refuse to accept anything other than a push for playoffs this year. Because I'm fed up of washing my life away in League One. So that is my benchmark, right? That's what's going to happen. But then you look at what's happened over the course of the summer and the build-up we've had, it's hard to align those two thoughts at the moment. So I can't predict where we're going to be. There's nothing to tell us where we're going to be at the moment. But that's why I want us to be top 8, and that's where we should be looking for top 6, blah, blah, blah. But we're probably going to finish 13th again or something shit like that.
13th again? We've dreamed of 13th for like the last 10 years, haven't we?
15th. Did we not? Have we never finished 13th?
I think we finished 14th, or roughly 14th, at least once under Coleman, maybe.
God, I'm getting into the realms of fantasy here, aren't I? 13th. Yeah. Settle down.
Part of me almost thinks that 13th wouldn't be too bad a season this season, but again, that's a stunning lack of optimism. The recruitment drive hasn't been what I expected it to be.
That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, thus far, and I think maybe we'll find ourselves come the end of August with another 3 or 4 players through the door, and it'll make a big difference. But we can only go off what we've got now, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's my trouble really, because I think the club did a good job from a communications perspective at the early part of the summer, when everybody's sort of waning and they don't really know what to expect. They got the kit launch. As funny as it was, that went down really well. The season ticket prices, it's great. Everything was set up. We got Mowbray in. We were primed for what was going to be a good summer. And then over the course of the next couple of months, things just haven't quite turned out how you'd expect. And I can't imagine this is Mowbray's plan either. I mean, we didn't spend 3 weeks wooing him. And it was all based on this. Oh well, we want to get some lad from Sweden. I'm sure this wasn't his first choice, but he's working within the constraints that he's been given. So let's just hope we can get in 2 or 3 more just to round out that attacking midfield area and move from there.
Paul, where do you think we'll finish?
At the moment, I worry that we're going to be quite low down the table. I mean, all you can ever do is build on what you had last season, and my worry, our obviously concerns last season were goals. I don't see us having brought in a player who's going to replace the 7 that Newblay got.
Yeah.
It's just, 2 seasons ago we got lucky with Callum Wilson. Last season we got lucky and unlucky in the way that obviously you broke down, but we got lucky with Dominic Samuels. We're going to have to get lucky again with a third young striker who's just going to hit form with us. So my worry is that we haven't made a marquee attacking striker signing, and I know teams in this level don't really do that. But when, as I sort of say, what's going on around the attacking third with the inexperience, and I just see too many players who I've seen before who are sort of brilliant for 20 minutes and then crap for 20 minutes. And my worry is we've got too many of those still. We don't have enough players you can hang your hat on. I really can see us struggling this season unless something dramatic. We make 2 really impressive signings in the next month.
And I don't think that's beyond the realms of possibility. I think that's reasonably likely that we'll sign 2 decent players between now and the end of the month. But I think that's still 2 players, and I think it's still... I just, I don't know. I think this is the problem with doing it now when the window was still open. Because I think at least Mowbray's been honest about the fact that the team isn't ready as far as he sees it and that we might have to sort of scrape through the first few games. But that in itself is something of a worry, isn't it? Given how much everyone talks about the importance of pre-season and blah, 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 blah. I don't know whether we're still in for... I think everybody wants to be hoping that with Mowbray at the helm, we'll be pushing for the playoffs this season. I just don't know whether it's a season too soon.
My only issue is that it's League One, and when you see the other clubs that make pushes for the playoffs every year, it just winds me up because they're just full of players that nobody knows, and we've had year upon year of seasons of teams with players that people do know and good players. I mean that Callum Wilson season, the first half of it. When you look at that squad now, you look at that first team, how the hell we were... I know we had the deduction, but even so, we should have been well embedded within the playoffs, and we just let that fall away again. It shouldn't be that hard.
I'm going to say 14th maybe this season, I think. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how it pans out, won't we?
Yeah. Ask us again, in April.
Yeah.
Well, so the other thing is, at this moment in time, we're putting a lot of pressure on Maddison. The Ruben Lamares, who was the lad at Spurs, people do seem to be talking very highly of him. And you just hope if those sort of players do click enough, at least it'll be interesting to watch while we're losing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up then. So we've got Wigan next Saturday and then Rochdale on the Tuesday, is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
To give you a bit of a rundown on the two teams, Wigan obviously came down from the Championship last season.
Currently bottom of the table.
Yeah, which it means a lot, obviously. They, you would recognise an enormous amount of the players in their squad. They've got Leon Barnett at the back, which you would have hoped would be a really bad omen for them, but you get the impression he's probably all right in League One. Emerson Boyce, you'll remember of having been there for about 1,000,000 years. They've got Don Cowie, who was at Cardiff, decent player. Michael Jacobs, who was talked about coming here, but then opted for Wigan, obviously. Will Grigg up front, who scored tons of goals in League One over the last few years. Craig Davies from Bolton up front. Grant Holt still there. Yeah.
Christ, that's a recruitment drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've got Jermaine Pennant.
They have indeed, yeah, you're right.
Jesus wept.
But last season's one of the award winners for crappiest loan of the season, Sammy Odoisi, who's bound to score next Saturday.
Yeah, well, you would have thought if he gets in the team, I'm not convinced looking through their midfield that he's going to get a starting shot, but we'll have to wait and see. I would normally find myself brimming over with optimism about this game because this is the absolute archetype of the game that we should win. A team that had come down from the Championship with a really horrible downward momentum about them. They had totally whimpered to relegation last season. What looks like a squad of potentially decent players that could just be overpaid and not asked. At home, sense of optimism around the club. Still, unfortunately for me, feel like a 1-0 defeat. Neil?
Yeah, I think I feel like we could draw it just because it will even itself out with the whole momentum of the first game and them being good. So I get a sense it could be maybe a 1-1 draw.
Paul?
I'd settle for a draw. I'm going to go 0-0. Just hope to dear God our defence don't concede. We'll win 4 or 5-0 now. I'm being this pessimistic.
Well, let's hope so. Rochdale, very much along the lines of what you were describing earlier, Neil, a squad of what looks on the face of it of pretty much unknowns that just gel incredibly well, incredibly hard to break down, really, really well organised, really industrious. The odd familiar name out there, Darius Henderson, has obviously been terrorising defences with his elbows for about the last 10 years. They've got Peter Vincenti recently signed a new contract, who's a really, really good creative midfielder. And one or two other players in there. I think it's another one that's going to be very tough for us. I think they will show our naivety much more so than most of the teams in League One will. I can't see anything other than a bit more of defeat with no goals on Tuesday as well. Sorry.
Plus, they've got the man with the most Irish sounding name of all time. They've got Brian Barry Murphy.
Yeah, that is good.
That's top quality.
I thought you were going to say Noble Lazarus.
No.
The man with the most biblical sounding name in the world,
Yeah.
Paul, what do you reckon?
I'm going to Rochdale, and my record at Rochdale's horrific.
Okay.
So I reckon we'll lose 2-0.
And Neil?
All depends on sort of how cohesive they are. I mean, last year they were a good unit, so if they remain cohesive and we're just, a drop of players all over the pitch, then I think they'll beat us again. So 2-1.
Plus, most times in the first round of the League Cup, we do put out a team with an average age of about 16. And loads of players who suddenly sort of disappear in 5 years' time make their debut and become our youngest ever player in the first round of the League Cup. So if we take it with our usual amount of seriousness, it'll be 2 youth teams playing.
Isn't it because we're a big fish playing a team like Morecambe, and now the longer we stay in League One, the worse that gets?
Can we played Hartlepool and the average age of the team was 19 or something ridiculous?
Strong.
And Jermaine Granderson came on up front.
Yeah, good call, yeah, good knowledge. Final thing to say about Rochdale, actually, is they have made 2 incredibly astute signings in the summer in Jim McNulty. Wire fans will recognise the name of there, but he was the defender at Barnsley that's really stood out, or defender and defensive midfielder who really stood out for a long time. And they've signed Donald McDermott as well, who I think was at Man City, who was a favoured kid at one point, but presumably just never quite cut it past the £10 billion worth of midfielders that they've got there.
I'd have to say that's probably the most Irish name I've heard.
Yeah, Donald McDermott sounds like someone from Father Ted, doesn't
he? Yeah, just a mixture of them all.
Yeah.
You would have thought teams like Rochdale and Bury and that lot would just be full of ex-Man United, ex-Man City kids, wouldn't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, that's...
Rightio then, so we are going to be back with you presumably after the Rochdale game, I imagine. So thanks for listening again. And if you want to get in touch with us, the email address is neellampteyshow@gmail.com and the Twitter is @neellampteyshow. Hopefully we'll be coming to you in 10 days' time or whatever it is with some better sound quality, etc. But aside from that, all I've left for me to do is say goodbye to Paul Knowles.
Cheers, mate.
And thank you to Neil Allison.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye from me. Bye! Hiya, it's Joey here again. Forgot to mention a number of things when we recorded last night, and just as I'm editing realised it and just wanted to pop them in separately. Thanks again for listening. First was to recommend 2 blogs for you. First one is Sideways Sammy, who long-term listeners will have heard on the pod a fair few times. His is sidewayssammy.wordpress.com. Fantastic stuff, really, really phenomenally comprehensive pre-season review that hopefully you'll have seen in the last year or 2 years maybe. I can't remember how long he's been doing it for, but again, this one is a real behemoth of a pre-season. And the regular contributions of Matty Roper, which is mattyroper.wordpress.com. Did I say Sideways Sammy? sidewayssammy.wordpress.com? If I didn't, you got it twice. Matty's great again, really regular, a lot of opinion about how he feels things are going on a number of different fronts, and really good stuff again. And a reminder to anyone that writes a blog that wants it pushing, we're more than happy to do so. Just get in touch with us on the email address or the Twitter that I gave out earlier in the show. And the final one is to let anyone know that hears it before this, depending on what time this comes out, if you hear it in time, me and Neil will be on CWR tonight talking about Cov at 6 o'clock. So, check it out if you've got the availability. Hoping that we might have cracked some of the technical issues, so the next one should have all sorts of good sound and maybe even some sort of musical stings and jingles, which a couple of people have asked for. Again, if you've got any suggestions, just get in touch with us, because we'd like to know what you like, what you don't like, to try and make it the best possible podcast for you, the listener. Thanks, guys. I'm going to leave you with the revamped theme tune. So thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.